Hi, this is Maggie from Crafts the Charm. Thank you for stopping by my channel. I'm so glad you're here. As promised, I'm going to make a coil basket with 2 colors, and here are the materials that you're going to need. So I thought I would try with a less expensive material to coil around. So I got this twisted sisal rope. It's 100 feet and it was around $5 at Walmart. And then I'm going to use 2 colors of yarn. I bought these 2 skeins of yarn at the Dollar Tree. And one color is my favorite charcoal tweed. And this brown color I had never purchased before. This is called rust tweed. And one of the reasons I wanted to use these tweed colors is because I think it will look better than a solid color, just in case a little bit of that sisal shows through while we're making the basket. Now you're also going to want one of these little hook tools, which is just a paper clip that's been opened up and then we bend a little hook on the end, and you'll want some scissors. Now to start, you're going to pick a color of yarn to start with. That's going to be your main color for your basket. And we're just going to start by making the base of the basket. And I use about, I'd say 50 inches of yarn each time. So I just measure out around 50 inches of the brown yarn because that's going to be the base color for my basket, and cut that off. Now this sisal, it's taped at the end, and it's also very, very stiff at the end. I'm not sure if they treat it maybe at the end, and I didn't realize that when I started. So I would recommend, if your sisal is the same, that you just cut off that stiff end, because it meant that I really couldn't bend it. And what I decided to do was whip the end of the sisal to start. Now in the past, I think we've just started by just wrapping. But if you want to do a whipping technique like I'm doing, make a loop. You're going to point the loop towards the inside of the sisal and then start wrapping from the end. And then you pull the yarn through that loop at the end. Pull that little end that's on the end of the sisal near the tape, so that you're pulling that loop under the wrapping, and then pull both ends tight. And that's just going to give us a nice tight start. It's not going to come undone at all. Again, I don't know that it's really necessary. I think you can just start off by laying the yarn along the sisal towards the end and then wrapping from the end in. But this is a stronger technique for finishing off the end of a rope. So especially if you cut that tape off, you might want to do this. And then from here, we're going to wrap. Now, really, one thing to remember is to always wrap away from yourself. So wrap around the sisal away from yourself. And do this until you have enough wrapped that you can bend the sisal over against itself to form a loop, and then begin wrapping both the sisal and that end together so that you're connecting those 2 pieces together. So you're going to wrap over both of them for a little bit and then continue on wrapping the sisal. And then again, you're going to keep wrapping until you can bend it over. And then, this is important, always bring that yarn up and between the piece that you're wrapping and the piece that you're about to loop through. Then take your hook, and you can either bring it up through the bottom, which is what I tend to do, or you could poke it down through the top, but then use that hook to hook your yarn, pull it tight, and then again, bring that yarn up between the pieces, and remember to wrap away from yourself. Now pick a number, and that number is going to be the number of wraps you do before you do the fastening again, by pulling the yarn up, using the hook to pull it through, and pulling it back up. My number was 15. You're not always going to be able to wrap to exactly that number, because sometimes that number will get you exactly where another wrapping is, and you're not going to be able to pull through there. But just go a couple more and then pull through, or a couple less and then pull through. And sometimes you're going to get to the end of your yarn maybe before you reach your number, and that's okay. Just pull through once you've reached close to the end of your yarn, and then wrap 1 or 2 more times, and then you can start a new piece of yarn. To start a new piece of yarn, lay your yarn along the sisal, and then remember to wrap away from yourself. You're going to wrap over that tail and the tail of the old piece of yarn, and continue wrapping away from yourself. Now, keep working until you have a base size that you want. Now I decided to make the base of my basket about 3 inches in diameter. Once you've made that decision, as you coil, you're going to bring the coils up onto the prior coil rather than having it completely to the side. And how much you bring it up onto the coil will determine the shape of your basket. So if you completely overlap your coils, you're going to get a straight-sided basket. Or if you don't overlap completely, then you're going to have a basket that goes up more gradually. Once you've created the base of your basket, you're going to start creating the sides, and this is where I wanted to add a pattern. So from now on, we're going to use 2 strands of yarn. And I imagine this is how it's done. I was just taking a page from knitting, because when you do stranded knitting, you have the 2 colors of yarn and you bring the color that you're not using along with you. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. Before I want to start with my pattern color, which in this case is black, I start wrapping around both the brown and the black to hold that black down. And then once I reach the place where I want to start my pattern, then I start wrapping with the black instead of the brown, and I wrap over the brown as I'm wrapping. So I'm carrying it along with me so that once I reach the end of the black, the brown yarn is right there, and I can start wrapping with the brown and wrap over the black again. So what I started with was 5 wraps of the black, and I tried to space these so that they were at the compass points of this basket, but I wasn't very successful. 2 of them are closer to each other on one side and 2 are closer on the other side, so they're not exactly at the compass points, but that's roughly what I did. So I did 4 sets of 5 wraps of black. And now it just becomes slightly trickier, the counting and deciding when you're going to pull through and when you're going to replace yarn, but you just follow the same principle. So I try to go 15, and of course I'm never going to tie it with the black because that would make a black stripe around the prior coil, so I always use the brown yarn to pull through. Now, once I had my 4 sets of 5 black coils, I wanted to make a sort of diamond pattern, so I want the next piece to be wider. And what I decided is I would make it 15, so 5 before the 5 black, then 5 covering, and then 5 after. So the way I did that was I wrapped the brown right up to where the black was on the coil below, and then I unwrapped 5 times and started wrapping with the black. And remember that you want to position that, so while you're wrapping, it's not necessarily positioned exactly the way it's going to be positioned. So I wrapped with the brown and then put the coil where it was going to eventually lie so that it was in the correct location, so I would know where to put those black wrappings, and then did 15. And so I did that all the way around for the second row. And here's what that looks like for 2 of the little diamonds. And then I did 1 more that was even wider. And at this point, you're going to be wrapping black around black sometimes when you fasten the coil to the coil below. So as long as you just match the color to the color that's below when you do the fastening, you're fine. And then I started tapering back and getting smaller. And I just used the same principle each time. I would wrap the brown to where the black was on the coil below, and then either continue to wrap if I'm tapering down, or go backwards if I'm tapering up. And I used 5 each time as my difference between each of the sizes in my little diamond, and then replaced with the black. Now, to finish this off, I did 1 brown coil that went all the way around, and then I wanted to finish off with a black top. So to do that, I continued to bring the brown with me so that I could always use the brown yarn to connect through to the coil below. So even though the top coil is black, I would use that brown yarn that I was bringing along with me under the black to connect to the brown coil below, and then I would continue with the black. And once I had a complete black row at the top, I cut the sisal and I tapered it so that it would sort of blend nicely into the last coil. And then for several wraps, both for that entire taper and for a little bit before, I wrapped around the top piece and the coil below. And I then fed the yarn through a few times, so it was too tight for me to pull it under what I had already wrapped. So I did some loose wraps and fed the yarn under and then tightened it and then cut the yarn. And here it is. I'd love to know what you think of this project. You could certainly do this in other colors. I wanted something that looked organic, and that's why I picked these colors. Plus, I do like these colors. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.